Leading about 20 professionals on its team, Rafael distinguishes himself with a compassionate leadership. He's a mobilizer and profoundly human. He's renowned amongst the 15 most influential creators on LinkedIn in Quebec. I would say even maybe the 10 or 5 most influential creators. He's quite a phenomenon in Quebec. He's also was in the top 4 of entrepreneurs in Quebec and the top 20 NGO founders of 2023. He is also a finalist last year for Artista in the category Young Leader of the Year. He was also named Young Leader of the Year by Quebec by the CCEN. Rafael is also a 2025-26 fellow of the National Policy Program called Action Canada. Acknowledgement of his work and of its impact and of his vision on the pan-Canadian level. He's also sitting on the board of directors of the Musée McCord Stewart, which is one of the most emblematic cultural institutions of Canada that's dedicated to the preservation of the historical heritage of Canada, of Quebec and Montreal. He promotes open dialogues on diversity and inclusion. He's a regular speaker and a pundit in Quebecois media. He is inhabited by a profound passion for humanity and for social justice. He's dedicated most of his life to creating safer, more inclusive, and respectful spaces where each voice, VOIX, has its place. So please join me in welcoming Rafaël Provost. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to spend the next hour with you. It makes me quite emotional every time when I heard my professional biography like this, because I'm going to tell you the version that's a little less glossy, a little less accessible, and namely a more human version. I'm Rafaël Provost, as I use he, him pronouns. I'm a little guy from the country, from Rive Sud in Montreal, so 45 minutes from Montreal. And for 18 years, this little village seems so far from my dreams. It was so far from the city, even though we were just nearby. I grew up in a well-meaning family, but very ignorant family. So you know what that can represent, ignorance. It can be quite dangerous. So luckily, there was a little bit of good intentions embedded into it. I was bullied every single day of my existence until I was 18 years old. I was in this tiny school where everyone looked alike, and so I really was the diversity. I mean, of course, I had my limitations in my diversity, but still, people started labeling me very early on my journey, and not the correct labels, the worst ones that I will not repeat here. I can say I am a 32-year-old gay man, but these were not the words that they were using to talk about me. It was all the worst insults I heard every single day. Every day where I went to school, I had this knot in my stomach to say, what else is going to happen to me today? What else are they going to call me by? But I still had really great friends. I wanted to do theater. I wanted to do public speaking. And every day people reminded me that it wasn't my place to do this. So it was very difficult. However, I was a boy who had dreams, and I dreamed to be able to do this kind of thing. But I was saying, hey, will it ever be possible while being gay? Because clearly when we're talking about this, it doesn't seem very possible when we're in this world. So that was the image I had until one day there was a teacher who made me the most beautiful gift. She took probably all the courage she could muster and all the assurance she had. It was in secondaire 5, so 11th grade. We had to do a public speech on a book of our choice. And at the end, where the period where the teacher had explained the instructions, the teacher, whose name is Justine, I don't know if you've ever had someone who have you ever had experiences where you didn't really get along with your teachers, where they're just so annoying? Justin was one of those really annoying teachers. And she looks at her at the end of the period and she says, Rafael, I would like you to read this book. If you're not okay with it, I'd like you to read this book. She said, I think this would be good for you. She says, everyone has to read what they want, but I have to read her book. But it was the most beautiful gift. She put into my hands a book named uh, The Night of the Prince of Charmings by a Quebecois author. And it's about a 17-year-old who falls in love with a man. And it's the first time. So it's how he discovers his homosexuality, the meeting his parents, his step parents. And it's the first time in my life, it's true, that I had words to define myself. It was the first time ever. I read the book 5 times during this public speaking project. I felt like I had an encyclopedia between my hands. Every time I saw it, if we saw 2 men kissing on TV, my dad would turn the TV off. So I didn't have much representation around me about queerness. But when this public speech project came about, I had read this book, and remember, I was in this small country village in this school. And so I was telling the story about this 17-year-old boy who does his coming out. And I saw people looking at me saying, what the fuck? And so I said, well, me too, I'm gay. And I don't ever want people to pick on me again. And there was just complete silence. And I said, what have I just done? There was a mask that fell away. It didn't fix all my problems one day the next, and I continued to be bullied, but there was a switch that happened within myself. I will decide how I'm going to present myself. I'm going to decide how I want to be with myself. And it changed everything. The teacher she had the courage to share this book with me. She, despite all my way of being, she shared this book with me. Everyone could have access to these books, but this really changed everything for me. And since then, there was a connection within myself. The veil was lifted. I promised myself to never have to wear this mask again. Sometimes I'm scared. Sometimes I have to wear it when I'm traveling. And globally, I chose and daily to not wear it. And even with the people I work with today, I encourage people to live in a world where we don't have to wear these masks to protect ourselves. So that's a little bit more on myself. That's goes beyond the biography that we heard earlier, to put you into context on who am I and why I'm in front of you today. And it's a real privilege to be the executive director for this organization for the respect of diversity and inclusion. We have the longest title for an organization, but it really highlights what we've been doing for 30 years. We go into schools in Quebec, but also in the West and in the East, in New Brunswick, Ontario. And we work with extraordinary professionals that give awareness trainings concerning different forms of bullying, whether it's sexism, racism, homophobia, transphobia, bullying. So we really want to dig into these subjects with youth, so that if they are facing these challenges, they know that they're not alone. And if they have to suffer these things, people can really become conscious of the impact that it has on other people, to really understand the human dimension of what's different within all of us. And the goal isn't to understand everything, but just to understand, but to just find ourselves within respect. So that's what my team does daily. Every year we meet over 30,000 youth throughout the country. We have a team of about 20 people, and we travel. So we're really on the forefront of what's happening in society. What are the pressing questions that youth are having? What are the reactions that they bring as well? And I do find it very interesting, because schools and youth are the reflection of the rest of our society. And it's rare that we have such access to this broader portrait of society in one place. And youth really allow themselves to say real, true things. So within schools, we say, hey, it's great to be a group of adults, but there's even more weight when it's actually the youth themselves that are moving towards action. So we've created in the last few years, in about 50 different communities, this project called Empreinte, where we go into a school and we ask the youth, what would you like to do? What would you like to take on? And you're going to lead the project. We have youth who've written books on intersectional feminism, 14-year-old girls. We have others who've created podcasts, who've made murals, they fundraise for other organizations. Even talking about this, it gives me shivers. They were quite privileged to see the impact, because when we see them taking charge in their own communities, everyone else comes along. On Rive Sud in Montreal, we saw kids who led a survey to know what kind of bullying and discrimination were their colleagues experiencing. The school said, it's been years that we've been doing this and no one ever answers the survey, and we find the results are not very accurate. But now, watch out. The youth had a participation rating of 90%. To see that a young person, one young person on two, is identifying as having experienced discrimination, one on two youth. And so we can really, so one youth on two share that they've experienced discrimination. When we're talking about microaggressions, because we did a campaign to explain what microaggressions are, we had a rate of 75% of youth that were saying they were targeted by discrimination. So what have we done with these results, you might ask? Not a lot, because the school did not want us to share those results. I should probably mention that it's a private school. Yeah, I forgot to mention that. But we've done something with these results, and I'm doing it by sharing the results here. It's not important within the school, but it's important to show that there is a situation in our schools that is quite troubling. And we're talking a lot about LGBTQ realities, but we're also saying the rise of racism in Quebec, it just makes no sense. Sexism, misogyny, sexual violence, and we've been saying it for a long time. When we're just, you know, attacking one group of people, we're attacking the whole entire society. So people in queer communities used to, and LGBTQ people were saying, they say, oh, we're not living in discrimination anymore. Girl, you're the next on the list. And we can see this happening now. So we're seeing a switch in the last few years. And sometimes we're asking these questions. In fact, I was on Radio Canada in Edmonton, and people were saying, I thought things were going better. And this is the problem. We've maybe told ourselves too often that things are better. And so we've raised the bar. We've stopped doing as much awareness training as we used to do. And I'm saying this, it's not a destination, our mission. It's a long haul. It's an approach, and we never stop. And maybe some people were telling themselves this individually, that, but there are not more people who are maybe hating us more, but there's more people who are allowing themselves to say it. And that is very disturbing to me, that we've let this hatred take over. And it really inspires me to be here with you today. And I was thinking to myself, what could I say today? Because since yesterday, whether it's with the ball, or every human should assist to a ballroom event, to really witness the humanity of the events, to see people being themselves in respect. Everyone can really gain from witnessing this kind of experience, but not everyone will allow themselves this. But what I love are these human encounters in person. And that's what the journalist said. But what can we do? And there's at this knowledge hub, the idea is really to come together and gather. It does cost a lot of money, but it's extraordinary. And I think we're all going to bring something back to our own environments, our own organizations, and we're going to make those changes. But we need to meet in person. And often we'll see, in schools, people are in person, and people say, well, what can we do? Let's meet up, let's gather, let's sit around the table and talk about what we can do. And I'm sure that this is how we're going to find solutions. And I don't have the pretension to say that I'm in, I'm going to tell you mode. How do we actually operate? But I really hope that from between now and Saturday, we'll leave with solutions. I do find it intolerable, the situation that we're in today. What is happening here in Alberta that we're not doing in Quebec? What are we doing in Quebec that's not happening here? What's happening in the Maritimes? Can we all talk to each other to co-create solutions? Because right now we're going to just hit a wall. So now more than ever, we need to work together. And there's a sentence I love that I'm going to have tattooed on me, I swear. Together, we can all go further. And I'm going to add to this, it's not simple. Progressing forward together is not simple. And we saw it yesterday, and we're talking about this. A new friend of mine, Marianne here, we were discussing. We all need to come to it with humility. Put a bit of humility in our glass of water, glass of wine, whatever you're drinking, because right now we're all scared. And we're, as we were saying, these are systems that are made to conquer and divide. We all want the little bit of money that's available, the scarcity. So I'm a solutions guy. If there's a problem, what do we do with it? Funding will not improve in the next years, most certainly. I don't know what province you're in, but I'm looking at the next elections in Quebec, and I'm scared. I'm scared for our community organization. I'm scared for the LGBTQ communities in Quebec. And I'm thinking, what are we going to do? Because the needs are just as important and pressing. Like I said, youth are suffering in their schools. They're saying it louder than ever. They're suffering more than if we were, maybe. Maybe they have more space to say it at least. So, what do we do with this? Do we mutualize ourselves? Do we create more spaces such as this where we can share more? Will funding be cut? I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but there's going to be less and less public funding, but there is money elsewhere. I'm going to tell you a story. I came here 3 years ago, and I was looking at funding, and people are saying, Rafaël, we're getting all these great grants. I said, that in a year, this could all disappear. And as we're seeing today, like in Quebec, where all our funding is getting cuts, on the federal level, it's getting harder. I don't know for you guys, but if you've already submitted different grants applications, have any of you here have done that? Have any of you had rejections? Perfect. Have they told you why you were rejected? Yeah, we tell us, but it's never really clear, is it? So we spend hours and days having to, innovate and reflect, and we never get any news or receive rejections or approximate no's or rejections. And I was saying to myself, I can't be in a situation where I'm always going to have to depend on these. So I started to wonder with my team, uh, and I was thinking to myself, there's businesses in Quebec that have money. It's just that they don't know us. They're just waiting to give us money. I left with that idea, and I started becoming more present on LinkedIn. And I thought this was just a place to find youth, but actually, it's a great way to find money. Trust me. The proof is about a year ago, I started sharing a lot about myself, what I'm doing, conferences, all the interviews. Maybe I took 30-second clips of the interviews I'm doing just to using the right poignant moments. I share them. So I'm creating an audience with these. People are starting to follow me from different environments, not necessarily the same ecosystem as mine. So people from different spaces, and I start to see the change. And then I got a call from a business that want to have a conference during Pride Month. So I said, oh, here's another one of them. I'm going to use this. I'm going to make something out of this opportunity. So I accepted to give a conference. I gave the conference, and the honorarium was quite cheap. I said, trust me, don't worry. For me, it's in four. They were ashamed, but I said, don't worry. It's important just to have this conversation with your 600 employees is very lucrative for me. Trust me. So I did the conference. It went super well. The next day, I received a call, and they decided to make a donation to us, $5,000. I had asked for 500 for the conference, and I said, why? But we can see that there was a value to this, and we want to give you more. And so these organizations also understood that they could have a donation grant, a tax return on this. So we invited them to an event that we did. We said, hey, come check out what we're actually doing. So they sent some other employees. I met them again. We did another conference that wasn't at all in a specific Pride Month or anything. So I was thinking, okay, this is great. I did this during Pride, but they've seen all that's going on during that month. But so I'm not sure if the message was truly understood. So I'd like to do another message or another conference with my team. So I don't want to speak. I wasn't talking to employees this time. I was talking to parents, to people who are accompanying youth in the schools. And I discovered that they actually had a community hiring policy that was supposed to come to fight against bullying. So now today, this is our biggest funding body, this business, because we developed a relationship, we developed trust. And so they found out a way to really be engaged in community. They didn't know us before, though. They hadn't seen us anywhere, and they're giving us six-figure donations now. And often, because sometimes we'll be so stuck in our own and ecosystems that, we're in our echo chambers and our bubbles. So today, there's this business that's not perfect, that works, but that also would like to participate towards this change. It's within their values and their mandate. We just had to find them. So I'd like you to reflect on how we can just, I think this was a subject we touched on this morning, but how can we diversify these funding sources? How to do things differently, how to test them. So this was my LinkedIn. I try to use it differently. And today, well, now we have funders that are coming from all over. So this is an anecdote I wanted to share with you because we really, maybe my employees are very passionate and they have the mission imprinted on their heart. That's not what's going to pay our rent. It's not going to pay for food. So I'd really like to have people who are well and have good conditions in my business. So I really invite you to share your best practices. So maybe we'll say, oh, I don't want to talk about this business, or for example, one that's making ski-doos or sea-doos and all those things, all those beautiful toys. So how do we share our best? There's businesses like those that if we connect amongst us, maybe they're going to actually support you in your initiatives. And I don't have to fill out, 50 pages of grants writings when I'm approaching those businesses. It takes time to build those connections, but it's actually quite simple. And it's people who can support us. I can't say, wow, that's done. It's great. We don't know what's going to happen next. But at least I know that I'm not just depending on the government grants that are so variable and unpredictable. So I invite you to reflect on these better practices because it really scares me, this incoming situation. We see what's happening with the Americans. We're talking about them a lot, but we also need to be aware of what's happening in our own backyard, whether it's here in Alberta. You have a premier who is not a great ally towards our communities. I want to say she's just not an ally, but maybe also it's different elsewhere. So we just have to be very conscious of this and to see how we can share. So for example, when I receive requests to do interviews, to shed light on things, and when I'm talking about humility, this is what I mean. I promised myself that when I had my interview request in the beginning, I'll say, hey, wow, I'm so proud of myself, I'm on the radio. But when I see that people don't have the same opportunities as me, you need to lend those opportunities to others. So when I do them and then people invite me again, then I see that we all have something to share. So we need to share those opportunities to really tend olive branches. So I always try to help other organizations because I know where I'm coming from, and people have lent a hand to me in the past. So I think really this is how we need to share those opportunities going forward. Because to have this many youth who aren't doing well in our schools, this is something with which I struggle immensely on the daily when governments aren't doing anything. So what can we do as an organization to help each other out? Because I said yesterday, 7 youth on 10 are saying that they're victims of discrimination. And I'm talking about bullying a lot because I'd like to share
that schools are reflections of our space, and we are all diversity. That's what it's all about. And it's just about terms. Selecting a word, a term is so important because we have changed a bit our narratives. We have thought about civism, respect. And there, everybody says, well, yes, your workshops are quite interesting, but we have not changed anything in our workshops, the same PowerPoint, but it's how we present, how we're branding also our mission, our message. People endorsed it a bit more. And that's a choice that we've made deliberately to adapt our formula, our message, so it be better understood. And I see that when I go to certain medias, when I see with, expressions that people don't understand, then they disconnect, they don't hear. And I have anecdotes about that. 3 weeks ago, I received on LinkedIn a message from a man, a very long message. And I said, oh, well, another boomer that doesn't like me. So and then I start reading through his message, and then I thank him to have had the courage to forward that to me. And he starts. That's why actually I will stop at the first line. He tells me that it's been a year that he watches me on media, and every time he was, upset by that, and I was sort of nerving him to see you with, the way you are. I just would hate that. But at one point, I was with people. Sorry, I started to listen to you, and I said it makes sense. And I really listen. And now I'm looking forward to them because I paid attention to what you said. But you do repeat oftentimes what you say. And I said, yeah, my reputation, my team, communication team, did coach me to repeat, so that the people will understand. Because when they are listening, they do something else. They are watching TV, listening to radio, maybe in the while from in the kitchen and so on. So when you repeat things, then people will catch up. So what I'm telling is not magic per se. Respect, benevolence, goodwill, listening to one another, lending a hand, listening to the questions, asking how things are. So I've been spreading the same message a bit all over for a year. And then my dad, I would say, did you see my last interview at Radio Canada? No, you've been repeating yourself a lot. Then it means you are listening, and but I could say things that, but at the same time, I don't know for you, I have an attention deficit trouble that, a lot of information, a lot of graphs and numbers and so on. So I do repeat. So I repeat, and the man wrote to me, and maybe I repeated, and I strengthened, highlighted it a bit too much, but it did make its way. So if I can then make an impact to repetition, then we see it, we see the results. So I see that sometimes people spread out their messages. So many people will say so many things, and we have to always remember, to whom are we targeting that message? To whom are we addressing that message? Is it about us, or is it about the people we are talking to have them, go along with our message? So what's happening between us, we know that it's important what we're doing. So we validate. So who we are, but how do we make other people understand and have them embark along with us on that path? There are people who have hesitated to come here, but we have to give ourselves the mission maybe to bring along a friend who is not sure that they would attend. So we should give this to ourselves as a challenge. Bring along somebody who may not be part of our space, because amongst us, we are all convinced that what we're doing is the right thing. But how we transpose that for people who don't have the same experience or impression? I would dream that Daniel Smith would be here, even if we tie her to the chair, but at least that she'll be listening to, and then she will learn. And then I'll let you know about another anecdote from Quebec. Anybody from Quebec here? En quelque sorte. So somehow, Montreal, about a year ago, there was a documentary, quite popular, but popular for the wrong reasons. Mal Alpha. It's a documentary on the masculinization movement that is growing in Quebec. So Andrew Tate, we know him, but others are less popular, but all resemble him and are quite dangerous for Quebec. So that documentary was about that. So I heard about it and I said, this is going to make waves. And I'm somebody who wants to understand. And oftentimes, like somebody today was said, make a difference, allow yourself to be uncomfortable, unsafe. So I've put myself into such situations where I don't feel comfortable and go beyond, the protective sphere, but also because that's where the learning takes place for me. So I see that documentary and I said, to myself, so everybody said, "No, we should cancel it, don't watch it." But I said, no, we must actually watch it, because there are people that it uh, talks to, and we have to understand. So I asked my relation or communications team to contact the people who produced that because I wanted to grab a coffee with one of them. And I accepted. They detest gay, anybody that they don't look like them. They are less important. They will refuse an interview with me. But I was surprised that actually that person did accept. So I did go have a coffee with somebody proning masculinization. It was, I was telling you, I was tensed. I was 1 hour seated with that person, hearing horrible things, having to, coming recenter myself. But about an hour later, something took place. He started listening to me because was, talking about all the stats he was providing. Why is it that we don't have the testosterone? So I was listening to all his bullshit. But and then I said, okay, now, I would like you to listen, me. But I've been listening. We've been talking for about a while. No, it's like a monologue. You've been talking by yourself. It's not about an interview. I'm here to dialogue with you. And he says, "So, do you have a question for me?" So there, he was surprised because he left his comfort zone because he was trying to convince me so that I would turn into a masculinism. I was the I would be the wrong person for that. So now he was expecting a question from me. Where are you from? Okay, that's our starting point. So I started a bit telling him about my story as I did a bit earlier. So something took place, something got triggered, and that's he became a bit interested in my position because we found common grounds. We came from the same kind of villages. So we talked about our schools and we started talking about so many different things than what we were theoretically supposed to discuss, the documentary, the movement behind it, and so on. So we started talking about our own narrative, our history. His parents were two social workers, and some things he was, angry at them. Things happened he doesn't want to talk about. So the whole thing lasted about 30 minutes, and then at the end, I said, "Okay, I have to go." But a month later on Instagram, I shared about an interview, and he writes to me. He says, "Rafael, I did listen to you, but I was not in agreement with you, but I did listen to your podcast." So I don't know how much he understood, but he did listen. So to learn to listen, even though we disagree with what is being said, but something spreads out. There is a seed out there when we listen. So I learned a lot from that meeting. The power to find common grounds, to listen to each other. And oftentimes we are afraid to do that. We, sort of remain in the circle of people we are comfortable with. But, things that are the good or are good with me, but we have to go beyond that context. We need people that don't hesitate to actually meet up with these people to better understand. Because that man out there was as much um, wanting to live as I was. So I don't want to disappear. I want to leave. So where do we find that? Where do we meet halfway? So it's a whole learning experience. So I don't want people to go into unsafe, sorry, situations. No, I was in a coffee place. I have friends around. I was not really alone. And as a director general, as a personality in Quebec, I have privileges, but I also have responsibilities, and I want to use them. And I wanted to use that privilege to meet up with that person and to start seeding something. I may not have transformed him or changed, but at least if he was able to respect me, maybe when he meets somebody who resembles me, then he will think about that and then behave differently. So that's what we were trying to achieve, to create such spaces, open dialogues. And that's what we try to do at Ensemble, to go beyond the comfort zone, meet those prime ministers, those VIPs, even if we don't agree with them, to understand what is it that they don't understand, because we are here to learn from one another. So these are the little things that I've experienced. And this is why I'm always wearing black, because always I'm always hot, feeling warm when I'm doing interviews and so on. So so that it doesn't show when I'm doing TV interviews. And right now I am actually hot. My temperature is high, and this is why I'm not wearing color. Because one time I had an interview with Sophie Durocher in Quebec, and wearing white is not a good idea, because that's all that you see on TV, all that perspiration under your armpits. So that's why I'm wearing black. But just public relations tip 101, I chose that on purpose because, and I always remember something that was even more uncomfortable is my primary school years, secondary school years, as I was telling you, because I didn't have then the tools that I have now to meet up with such people. And oftentimes I was asked, what is it? How can you just sit and talk with people, the Richard Martineau of these worlds? Because it's like for me sitting with uncles, aunts, but just to be able to dialogue with them. Because when you're a child, we have less of that power to tell people that, they are create issues for you. But today I have such an opportunity through the role, the function, the title that I have, the privileges, and I want to make good of them. And that will also be of use to others. So it's like I'm addressing my uncle, auntie that I have problems with, but I'm still able to talk to today and confront them and towards constructive results. So when we have platforms, we should use them in that purpose. So Uncle Richard and Auntie Sophie Durocher, these were the uncles and aunties. So now at Ensemble, our mission, we reflect on how we can improve things. Because, I was talking about finances, funding, whether we like or not the media, but the media have the work is to bring out what people do. And in Quebec, like 3 weeks ago, I came to Edmonton with this big question when it comes to funding. What are we going to do? In Quebec, it was recently announced that community fundings will be frozen. All community organizations that have not signed an agreement with the government, that money is being withheld because they would rather spend on an Olympic stadium rather than the social protective net webs of things. So this is, when people are on the media, they feel saturated, and social media, we don't have access to all the news. One Canadian on three still think that the news are to be found on social medias. So one person over three thinks that will derive news from not the journalists. It's not that the journalists are not good, but they do research, they nuance the information. Then the 1 million people that are following people on social media who may be saying anything they want. So too many people derive their thought from social media. So right now in Quebec, community funding is frozen, and many of my friends of OBNLs and NGOs are waiting that the checks arrive through the mail, and I tell them, no, it won't come. So what should we do? Maybe you are experiencing that in your provinces respectively, and so these are all the kinds of things that we have to speak directly and candidly about. And we have to work our sleeves up and really work on that, find solutions. And I actually prepared something, but I wanted to reflect on with you, brainstorm it, and because we have collectively participate to that anger, yes, but we transform that anger towards a pathway to solutions. And these past days in Canada, in Quebec, we flatter ourselves that we have a chart of rights and freedom, about which, that we talk about on the international scene, that we are protected by this charter. But if you have studied the discrimination cases, yes, this chart on Instagram 2 weeks ago, I see a video from a young a youth, sorry, on video that says, we, the gays, we are incompetent, we are, agree everything that bad can be said and was said on that video. So we want to flag that. So about 30 people have flagged that, and we have also 30 of us say this does not contravene the charter, about, hates the segment of the charter on that. So this has circulated around, and we cannot access this information. And the charter, in theory, should apply to Instagram in Quebec, in Canada, and and it could not apply. So it was, concerning to me, because in our missions in school, when you talk about virtual spaces in schools, when we're talking to people, are we able to come out of to find solutions to that? So that's why I invite you to express yourself to the governments, to consult one another, to do something about it, because I don't feel protected in the world that we are pretty much forced to live in now. It's true that social media, connect with many people, but when we allow propagating of such things freely, then I'm concerned, and we must reflect all of us together as to how to understand things. Should Instagram disappear so something else be created? We have to reflect on that. We have to think through, because using those platforms, they spread things out. I did an exercise. My sister, I have two younger sisters, Joanie and Justine, and they created fake profiles on social media. And they would provide comment when people are mean to us. And she put benevolent and beautiful comments. But the hatred remains. And I'm despite. So when we talk about allied, and my sister Justine is a great ally, but now we're talking about rights to the youth, and there is one that threatens me, insults me on Instagram, and then I want people to see what is it that I receive. So my sister found the employer of that guy and contacted him. She found who employs that man, and then there is somebody with a phobia, a dangerous man that works for you, because if I see what he writes about my brother on social media, I can't imagine what it is he does, and how it is he is at the workplace. So now these issues, that construction company confronted the employee and sent them a warning, sent me a long message to, this big message, he has issues, not feeling well these days, and all kinds of excuses. So I tell them, work on your team, find help, because I provide you with references freely if you don't have the means to pay for a psychologist, but do get help, because your unhappiness will not define my happiness. So I congratulate and I thank my sister Justine to have had that courage and to remind that hatred does not have a place here, and that if we do our work and we put our voices together as we should, we will change and improve things. And I cannot tolerate that this can happen to somebody else, that an older Rafael will experience what the young Rafael in me has experienced. So this is what I wanted to share. This is what I'm passionate about. I'm an optimistic guy, but I have a bit of anxiety now, but I'm reassured when I see people like you surrounding me that are as well motivated, engaged, who want changes. But more than ever, we have to work hand in hand as a team, because alone you go faster, but together we go even farther. So make contacts, exchange, have a coffee, so that we find together solutions, and then we fight together towards solutions. Voilà. So if you have questions, comments in English, no problem. If that is simpler for you to express yourselves, if you have insults, just keep them for you. And we leave it, suspense. But if you write on Instagram, my sister will deal with you. Solutions. Donc, je dois vous dire que non, honnêtement, je n'ai pas de solution. Mais j'ai une question cependant. Et vous avez mentionné, Raphaël, que en ligne, vous avez utilisé une différente démarche quand on parle d'image de marque. Parlez-nous-en davantage, parce que Brie et moi et notre équipe, nous avons lancé un projet de représentation queer au Canada, et on observe exactement le même phénomène, surtout avec l'intelligence artificielle et son intervention. Il y a pas mal de données dans le domaine public là qui arrivent, donc on ne sait pas comment le gouvernement peut rendre ces espaces de médias sociaux plus démocratiques. Quelle est votre opinion là-dessus? Excellent and big important question. what you just mentioned there. I think that it's not tomorrow that we will have the ideal platform. But how can we then choose to how we want to distribute our messages? How do we translate those? We must remain accessible, clear in our messaging, and not be afraid to also present things through social media. But if you want to have an impact, because probably what you're doing as work must be seen and heard by as many people as possible. So to find a way to be heard and seen, so remain accessible, may it be heard, even if that's going to fluster people. And if it does fluster, I would say very good. It means it's going to trigger reflection or thought in people. But oftentimes we have this trend in the community sector, the community university space, not to be ambitious, be as ambitious as the impact of our ambitions, of our ideas. You can generate that through contacting the media. Make sure your media message can be heard. Use TikTok. Find a way to brand your message. Me, I really, I enjoy using those platforms. I play with that to be heard so that even we be heard and seen by people who appreciate or don't appreciate us. So we have sort of like an instant imaging coming out. And the people that have not heard or seen us, and I have that proof when people approach me in the street or see me and they say, "I don't want to disturb you. I didn't want to say this," but the good comments are the bad comments. Sometimes we don't allow them. So if it's not that you're not doing a good job, if the people don't express themselves, but it is that they have not actually gotten to that step of expressing themselves. Thank you. So I was lucky to have a glass of wine with you. So, but for others, I would like you to expand on civism and the term that is being used in schools more often. It's an interesting concept because don't, we're not used to use that term, civism. And I wanted to, you expand on that for our circle here. True, we have spoken about it, words, the terms, how we approach different sectors. The age right now, the age where people will yield to conspiracy theory. Do you know about what age in average? 14 years old. When people are 14 in this day and age, this is when the peak of adhering to conspiracy theory is high and detesting others. It happens around 14. So it means that there are many people that have analyzed this question. How can that be at 14? This is where it peaks, those, falling into conspiracy theories and coming to hate others. And in Europe, in certain zones where they found that statistics, they thought, but never have we spoken more about diversity, inclusion in schools. There are committees. So maybe we have to go back to the basis that we don't know how to teach civism, civic education. What is a democracy? What is understanding of a diverse opinion from yours? So then they adapted their workshops on that theory of civic education in school, not only in school, but in companies too. And that's interesting because European companies would see polarization within their staff, people not agreeing, having conflicts. So now they teach civism or civic education at work, in the workplace. So do that exercise with people around you. We talk a lot about respect, respect, respect all the time. But what does respect really mean for you? And ask people around you. We talk about respect in schools, but we ask the youth, what is it that they understand of respect? Is it being respected or respecting others or respecting each one another? So when we're teaching respect, civism, so these are what we want to expand, develop, and reflect together about, brainstorm about it. How do we understand the notion behind it? And this is this is the opportunity that we have to seize. How we educate in Canada, we don't mention that. So if parents have not taught us that, how do we learn it? So people around us, we have to understand their concept. What is it respect means for them? It's not only about me listening to me. I have to be listening to others. So that's my work, to talk about respect all the time. So we must reflect on how do we engage that conversation in different spaces, enterprises, schools, choosing the terms so that we take time to understand how do people understand the term. And then this is coming back to what we should have had done in the past. It's like coming back to the base, but these are so important. The theory of respecting one another seems complex, but so thank you to talk about civic education. But we work on that, and we are changing things. We change that when in our grant applications. This is important so that people understand. So when we talk about DEI in our grant applications, how can people be against diversity, inclusion, equity? So they didn't understand that it also touches that dimension. So I will try to ask the question in French. You have a joyous, happy energy. So the curiosity, positive energy, in that you bring that to this room. And I have the impression also in the work you do in your sphere. So on days where things are more difficult to connect, to find center on the positivity, on the joy, on these good vibes, days where you didn't sleep well, oh yeah, bit of hunger pangs. Comment fais-tu interaction avec le monde lorsque la journée va mal? First, I will listen to Céline Dion. Vous ne connaissez pas Céline? Céline Dion. Oh, yeah, it's true, but the true answer really is I stop from a certain time to remain in a state of toxic positivity. But I can do so for me, and I accepted that there would be days where I just don't feel like doing this or that because I'm tired. But that's something I would not allow myself to go through and I was so tired, and I thought I was not, because I was energized to always continue fighting and rejected being tired. So now I do allow myself, because I know I'm surrounded by other arms, other people. So that's good also to have other people. We know that we can lean on when things go a bit more sour. And I would say that to remain authentic gives you more energy, even if sometimes that will generate conflicts to remain authentic. And I will gonna recite Celine Dion to close that question, and you will see how much I like Celine. So one day I understood that if Celine Dion cannot please everybody, then myself, I will not succeed that, because if Celine cannot do it, I just can't either. Yeah. And I accepted. I accepted that I cannot satisfy or please everybody, that I will not win every fight, that I will not, always be successful, positive. And there are people that I will be brushing me off. And I try to change my world. And this is what gives me more energy than the reverse when I talk about myself. And I do accept, to not always feel positive, but I remain by nature optimistic, resilient. I have not shared, all that I experience in life, but I look at people, in retrospective, and I see, there were worse days, and then it's not easy to experience such days. But to know that we have people around us, trust these people, feel that you are heard. But at 32, this is what I lean on, and this is what ground myself from. I, s- uh, I start.